Hey everyone, my name is Rel. If you're new here, then welcome to my channel, and if you've been here before, then welcome back. As you can tell from the title, today I want to talk to you guys about Family Guy. In my last video, I talked about King of the Hill and the profound effect that it had on me when I was a child. I encourage you to go and check it out still, but only if you're forgiving about some slight audio delays. And me sort of being kind of sappy there at the end. I mentioned in the beginning of that video that my media experience as a child was largely informed by the fact that my family didn't have a cable subscription when I was younger, so my channel options were pretty limited, and that's how I ended up watching Family Guy in the first place. So, well, at least I think so, because Fox was one of the only channels that I could actually, see. I don't really have any, specific memories of watching Family Guy, though, the way that I do with King of the Hill and some other shows. I can't picture myself watching the show. I can't picture myself laughing at the show. I don't have any specific memories of that happening. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen. That just means that I can't recall it happening. So there is that. I can remember the episode that made me stop watching entirely, which isn't necessarily a good sign for the show itself, but whatever. I'm trying to have an open mind. That's the whole point of this video, is that I'm going to try and have an open mind about this show, again, regardless of the fact that the only thing I can remember about it is the thing that made me stop watching in the first place. I can't really give you any trivia facts or knowledge that I have about the show either. That's the other thing, is that my knowledge of the show is quite limited, so my experience watching it has also been quite the learning experience. I do think that there was a period before I got to that one episode that made me stop that I did enjoy the show, regardless, like I said, of if I can remember enjoying it or not. And my theory for this is that I know that I've watched a lot of it. I've watched a lot of it. I don't think I watched every episode up until that one that made me quit, but I feel like I saw most of them, at least enough of them that I had an opinion about the show, right? So I want to try and find what made me keep returning to it, because there had to be something. I wouldn't have just subjected myself to something that I didn't like. I am very good at just quitting a show. I will walk out of a movie that I don't like. I don't care. So, there's gotta be something. And also, I'm, kind of obsessed with American Dad. Not even, low-key obsessed with American Dad. I'm high-key obsessed with American Dad. And here's the thing, okay? So, I'm letting you in on a secret. I don't want to be making a Family Guy video, alright? I'm holding myself hostage right now. I would like to be making an American Dad video. That's what I want to be doing with my heart. But I know that American Dad is the less liked show of the two. I don't know why, but I know this. This is what I've gathered, okay? Family Guy and American Dad, they do take place in the same cinematic universe, so they are related. They're semi-related. American Dad is the prettier sister, but that's beside the point. We will get there. I also am very aware that rage content gets engagement, so I'm going to do a Family Guy video instead of an American Dad video. But I do have a plan, okay? Because I don't want this to make me want to S-word myself. You know what I mean? So here's my plan. I'm going to watch the first 3 seasons of Family Guy and give you this little video that you're watching right now. And then after this, the next time that you see me talking about the McFarlane-verse, so anything related to Family Guy or American Dad, things are going to be a little bit more complicated, video structure style, essay structure style, but the important thing for me is that I will be able to talk about American Dad at that point. I'm a clown, actually. I don't know why I thought I was going to be able to talk about all
of the first 3 seasons of Family Guy in one reasonably sized video, but I did the math and it looks like it's actually going to work out to be over 12 hours if I do that. So, actually, the next time you see me, I'm not going to be talking about my beloved American Dad. I'm actually going to be talking about Family Guy again, because unfortunately, this video that was supposed to be one video is looking like it's actually going to be like 3 videos. Yes, I'm unhappy. No, I don't like it, but there's not a whole lot I can do about it because I'm not about to drop a 12.5 hour long Family Guy video because I know you freaks won't watch it. I can see my analytics. You only watch the first 6 minutes of my videos anyway. Okay, bye.
And the important thing for you is that you get to watch me watch a cartoon that I don't like. I don't plan on there being anything academic in this video like there was in the King of the Hill one. At least I don't think so. I literally cannot speak for future me at this point. No promises, but that's my goal. And yeah, that's it. I've over-explained myself now, but let's get into it.
All right, I'm going to work. Somebody's got to put food on this table.
Alrighty, so before I get into the pilot, I want to take a few moments and establish the universe that the show takes place in, the McFarlane verse, if you will, okay? So this is what I was talking about when I was saying that Family Guy and American Dad take place within the same cinematic universe, okay? The McFarlane verse. It also includes the Cleveland show, but we're not going to talk about her until a much later date, okay? So both shows, both American Dad and Family Guy, are sitcoms, right, to us, but they are also sitcoms within their respective universes, okay? The characters play the characters themselves. They are actors. Lois Griffin, she's a character to us, but she's also a character within the McFarlane verse, and she's played by an actress, okay? Not the same actress that voices her. That's who plays her in our universe. You see what I'm saying? Okay, got it. Great. So the big difference between Family Guy and American Dad is that American Dad is more... I'm noticing there's a cobweb behind me. That's really gross. I'm gonna get that. Give me a second. My arms are really short. I can't do this with a feather duster. I can't reach. Oh. Got it. I got it. It's back there on my husband's dress shoes. Can you tell that we don't dress nice often? Okay, I'm back. Sorry. God. Just, you don't see back in there very often. Yeah, he doesn't wear those shoes. Whatever. Okay, so, like I was saying, the difference between American Dad and Family Guy is that, American Dad is more serialized, Family Guy is more episodic. There's more continuity in American Dad. It's not exactly the most canon compliant show. They don't really care that much, but they do care more than Family Guy does. You see what I mean? Okay, great. The first episode of Family Guy, it aired on January 31st, 1999. As I'm filming this, we're coming up on her birthday. Excellent. Happy birthday to her. After Super Bowl 33, so it came on, like, immediately after. It was aired directly after the fact. Technically, there was a rough cut of the episode that had been aired about a month previously, but this was the first time that the full finished episode was being aired all at once. The episode, it opens with the Griffin family watching TV. They're watching the Brady Bunch. A lot of the episodes open like this. It is a sitcom about television. I'll explain more about that later, but that's basically the premise, okay? And that's part of the tone. I will say that while they were doing the Brady Bunch reference, I did not get it at first. I don't know what to say about that. It's a little bit embarrassing. It's not the only reference that I did not get, because not even one when this episode came out. So, like, these cultural references, they're not for me. I feel really lucky, actually, when I get the references, because then the joke is actually funny. And then after I got it, though, it made sense. Not the reference itself, I still didn't get the joke, but the fact that it was there and the fact that it was the Brady Bunch that was being referenced specifically. So, you know how the nostalgia cycle works. It's like about 30 years, show being made in 1999. It's going to reference cultural stuff and social stuff from the 70s. You see what I mean? This all makes sense. And like I said before, it is a show about sitcoms, so a lot of the cultural references are to other sitcoms. Sitcoms I have not seen. After the cold open, though, we're introduced to each of the family members: Lois, Meg, Chris, Stewie, and then Peter and Brian. Right away, we learn that Meg is insecure about the way that she looks. Chris isn't all that smart. Stewie is an evil genius. And Peter is selfish as all hell. We meet him when he enters the room to demand that Lois allow him. You see what I mean? To go to a bachelor party. Even though, obviously, okay, so Lois doesn't want him to go because Peter is an alcoholic, and what do you do at bachelor parties? You drink. The fact that he is an alcoholic is a plot point that is relevant in most episodes. At this point, you don't really see him hanging out at the bar with the guys as much, but that does become a very common scene as the show progresses. He goes to the party because conflict, and also because, like, the other most relevant thing in the show, other than Peter's alcoholism, is that he will do the opposite of what Lois wants in most cases. That's just the way that he is. He loves to disrespect his wife. That's just how it is. But when he's at the party, obviously he gets plastered, just like he said that he wouldn't, but we knew that he would. And this leads to him being supremely hungover the next morning, and he has to go to work anyway. So he does. He goes to work, but because he's so hungover, he falls asleep at work. He works at a toy factory. He's a quality control supervisor. So he lets a bunch of, like, dangerous toys get through, as well as some, like, gas cans and axes and such. And then he gets fired, right? Obviously. But that isn't, like, the issue to him. The issue is that because he was fired for being hungover, now he has to tell Lois what happened. Not that he lost his job, but that he drank like he said he wasn't going to, and that caused him to be hungover and lose his job. The drinking. That's the sticker. That's where we're stuck. He also doesn't want his wife to say that I told you so, because she was right, obviously. So in order to hide the fact that he has been fired, he tries out a few odd jobs. Those don't really work out. And eventually Peter resigns to the fact that he's going to have to explain to Lois what happened, because he is anticipating having to get an entirely new job, rather than just waiting out being offered his old one back. He does try to tell Lois what happens, but it's Peter, and he just, like, chickens out and calls her fat. I don't know. It's not very funny. It's a lame fat joke. And then instead of trying to talk to her again after this, though, he just, like, gives up. Peter just gives up and decides that the easiest thing is actually to sign up for unemployment assistance. So he'll get a welfare check and still be able to wait out being offered his old job, rather than just talk to his wife and get a new job. I don't know why he thinks he's going to be offered his old job back. That's not clear. So that happens. He goes down to the welfare office. They give him some unemployment checks. Everything is hunky-dory. He's all signed up and ready to go. He gets his first check in the mail, and then, okay, because the plot is just so wacky and zany, the check that he gets, it's for $150,000 instead of just $150 for the whole week, right? Peter rolls with this because he wants to be rich, and he has no problem spending this amount of money in a week and receiving another check from the government. Fine by him. Who cares? Fraud? Never heard of her. But, like, okay, I don't care. For the record, I don't care if Peter commits fraud. It doesn't matter. Like, the idea of committing welfare fraud on accident is hilarious to me, considering it's a very difficult crime to commit on purpose. It's hard to get welfare, like, without committing a crime on purpose. So makes sense to me. The problem, obviously, okay, so if it's not the fraud, the problem is that he's lying to Lois. That's the problem. And that's the problem that I have too, right? This is my problem, and this is a reoccurring problem that I have with Peter throughout this whole first season, is he lies and he disrespects Lois constantly. I can't stand it. She finds out the truth, inevitably, of course, because that's how this show works, and also, of course, she finds out through their teleporting mail carrier delivering the welfare check directly to her rather than to Peter. How did the mail lady get on the other side of the moat? Right? Oh, the moat's deep enough for a little speedboat? How did she get across? And after Lois finds out that Peter is lying to her and committing fraud, she confronts him about stealing money, not from the government, but from the taxpayers. And then, because Peter operates under Amelia Bedelia laws, he takes this to mean that the money needs to be returned directly to the taxpayers rather than paying it back to the welfare office. And so he jacks a blimp. I'm not sure how he got up there. And dumps, like, literal cash over the stadium that Super Bowl 33 is taking place at. And obviously this is like 100% because the episode is being aired after Super Bowl 33 itself. And I don't really mind the plug. It's pretty funny. And this is the part of the episode that made me laugh the hardest. Just one gun. Oh, and that's the end of the scene. Wait, did they just shoot down a blimp? And apparently, nobody dies in a gassy blimp fire, and Peter and Brian just end up getting arrested for the fraud that Peter committed. And during Peter's hearing, both him and Lois, they display some incredible whiteness. There's a Kool-Aid Man reference. Stewie mind controls the judge, and Peter is let off with a warning. That's it. That's the end of the episode. The status quo is happily restored. It's not the most satisfying, but it does what it's supposed to do. I will say that there's a lot of heavy lifting being done by this episode. Not necessarily like plot. Obviously, I don't like the way that the episode ends. It's boring. Or even characters, but like character archetypes are established, you know? They establish what the characters are supposed to represent. Like I was saying, we don't learn necessarily who Lois Griffin is, but we learn what Lois Griffin represents as an example of a sitcom mom. You see what I mean? To get into more detail about that, let me just establish this. Peter, we got the standard oafish, well-meaning dad. You think of a sitcom dad, that's him. Like I was saying, Lois, standard sitcom mom. She does it all. She's stretched too thin. All she wants is a little bit of respect and a break every now and then. Meg is the misunderstood eldest daughter. Chris is the overlooked middle child. And Stewie is the baby. Brian is the straight man. And this is important, okay, because these archetypes, these are the closest things that we're going to get to continuity on this show. And obviously, Stewie isn't just a baby. He is an evil baby. Or whatever, but they treat him like he's a baby. They treat him like he's just a baby. I don't know what to say about that. I don't really like the evil baby thing anyway. It's not funny. There's like this trend that happens where there's like a cute thing in media. It's not always a TV show. It could be a movie, and it's not always a human baby either. Any cute thing. And then by the end, it's like revealed that the cute thing is evil, to like subvert your expectations or whatever. I think it's boring. It's not funny. It's cringe. And there's a reason that they drop it with Stewie, who is arguably a character who's like in part responsible for popularizing this kind of character in the first place, like this trope. And even they drop it though, and he eventually he's just like a little mad scientist. And they do that because that's more interesting than him being evil. Anyway, like I said, the pilot, it's about establishing character archetypes, how they're going to work with each other. It doesn't really so much touch on the overall thesis of the show, like it being about television, but other than that, I do think that the brief sitcom references here and there do kind of help establish the tone, at least, and the style that we're going for. I think it also pretty effectively communicates like the humor that you're going to be presented with. It's like you don't know a whole lot about this show, but you do know what to expect from it after this first episode. It's fine, I guess. I do hate the cutaways a lot. I didn't count how many there were in the first episode, but there were a lot, and I did not like them. Aside from the cutaway gags, I did want to have a more concrete way of keeping track of how funny these episodes were to me, if that makes sense. And so I started marking tallies in my notes for each joke that was just like pure offensive shock humor. And I also started keeping tallies for each joke that I actually did find funny. In this first episode, I counted 13 bad jokes that flopped and nine good jokes that I actually laughed at. I did not count the mid jokes. Obviously, that is subjective. It's humor. If you have beef, take it up with me in the comments.
Honey, it's not gonna go away just because you don't like it.
Okay, so the second episode of season 1, it's way more interested in establishing the thesis than the first episode was. It works more like a pilot to me, in my opinion, as far as like themes go. I'm not mad at all. I do know that the pilot being more character based, it makes sense when you take into account that it was more of like the final evolution of Seth MacFarlane's original Larry and Steve concept, which my Seth heads will know were the characters that MacFarlane originally came up with as part of his thesis film when he was in college in 1995, and those are the characters that Fox contacted him about originally, so you can expect the pilot to be more about characters and less about themes, right? That being said, that's why the second episode is more about themes. See what I'm saying? So we're gonna skip the cold open for this second episode because I don't think it's very funny. It's a Stewie joke that I don't like. After that, we go to Lois accusing Peter of spending more time watching TV than with his family, and she sends him out to teach Meg how to drive. Peter gives Meg some really bad advice. He basically tells her that every time she's at a stoplight, she should challenge whoever is next to her to a street race. And she just like listens to him. I don't know why she does. She can't think for herself in this one, like, at all. And so then during her driver's test, she does this. She like challenges somebody to a street race at a red light. And not only that, but the person that she challenges is a cop in a squad car. Like, girl, what are you doing? What are you doing? Everybody also is so white in this family. I've already talked about it. We're going to talk about it more. We can talk about it now. Such white behavior. Whatever. It did make me laugh a little bit when it happened. But that's only because I think that disrespecting cops is funny. ACAB and all that. That's only the only funny part about it. None of the other bits of it is funny because it just serves to make Meg look foolish, which is not funny. That part's not funny. After the test, Peter has to drive them home because Meg failed, and then while he's driving, he gets distracted by somebody's TV through their front window because he's that addicted to TV, and he crashes the car into the town's cable transmitter. Oh gosh. I hate car accidents and things. This is a side note. This is about me. I was in a rollover car accident my senior year of high school. I was the only one in the car I was driving. But now, like, car accidents, in anything, it really stresses me out. I wouldn't say that it, like, fully triggers me, but it does give me anxiety. The whole town is pissed. They're really mad at him. And he puts the blame on Meg because he doesn't want to have his ass kicked by these people. And Meg agrees to let this happen because if she allows him to blame her, he'll buy her a convertible. And this is important to her because she is a teenage girl. And again, she cannot think for herself in this episode for some reason. Later, when she like briefly considers telling the truth, and there's a reference to another show I haven't seen, and there's like a voiceover where she like decides that she would rather have the car more than I want these people to like me. She does snap later in the episode, and that's only after Peter has started to like maladaptively cope with having no TV, and he's wearing this like TV shaped rig on his body that frames everything he sees like it's being played on a television set. And he wears the rig down to her school, and this embarrasses her in front of all of her classmates and everybody. And that's the last straw. She snaps, and obviously she's correct for this, but the moment is like stolen from her by Lois suddenly being in the scene and giving a speech to everybody that's mad about how it actually doesn't matter that the cable transmitter is out and who did it, because they should not want to watch TV that badly anyway. And that's fine. But that literally hijacks the narrative, and that's what the show is about for the rest of the episode, is about how TV is bad. Fuck Meg. Fuck everything to do with Meg's plot that was established, I guess. Bye, Meg. And then Lois's speech is so convincing that they agree. Peter and the rest of the town agree that TV, it's not that important. They should be focusing on other things. And so then we get this montage of the Griffin family doing all these activities together. I think it's supposed to be cute. I think it's supposed to be charming. I don't like it. It feels lame, especially after nobody has apologized to Meg and nobody has kicked Peter's ass. Eventually, it gets to a point where Peter, who used to be the lazy one, he's the only one that has any energy left for activities. The rest of the family, they have had it. They're about to tell him that they cannot go with him to this Germanic cultural fair that he wants to go to. And conveniently as they were telling him this, William Shatner's car breaks down in front of the Griffin house. I don't know why he's in Rhode Island, but he is. He and Peter hit it off. They decide to go to the festival together. Obviously, the reason that Peter is stoked about this is because Seth MacFarlane loves Star Trek, so Peter's favorite show is Star Trek. Peter and Bill, they get on like a house on fire, okay? Let me tell you, they get along great. They're out at the festival and they're having a wonderful time. It's raining and they don't care. They're having such a fun time. It doesn't matter that it's raining. At home, Lois is giving Meg a driving lesson, again, despite the rain. I didn't mention this before, but the reason that it's raining is that the Stewie runner this time is that he hates broccoli so much that he wants to invent a weather machine that will make it so cold that it'll kill every broccoli plant in the area. It's very Dr. Doofenshmirtz of him. It only kind of works. It just makes this giant rainstorm that we're seeing now. And in the rain, Bill and Peter, they want to go frolic in the streets. They are doing so. Meg is swerving all over the place. She strikes both William Shatner and her father with her vehicle.
Daddy, I'm sorry I ran you over and killed Mr. Shatner.
Oh, she killed him. Peter survives the accident, but he has to be hospitalized briefly. He's in a full body cast. While he's in the hospital, the nurse turns the TV on because at this point the town's cable's been fully restored. At first, he doesn't really want to be exposed to it. He feels like he has an addiction to TV, and so he doesn't want it on. But after a few minutes, after he starts watching, he gets comfortable again, and we see that he has a little bit of a healthier relationship with television at this point. Obviously, for the purposes of the status quo remaining the same, Peter is not over his TV addiction. He's effectively addicted to TV again at this point for a couple of reasons. It's funnier this way. It's funnier when Peter's a bad dad. The status quo that they've established is very important for them to maintain. The second reason is that I mentioned this before. We're going to talk about it now. It's a show about a show, and that show is about TV. It's about television. So the thing that made this like click for me, I was watching a Tuner for Tariq video from a while back now, and he talked about an episode that I have not watched, but it made everything like fall into place for me. The episode is 80s Guy, and in Tariq's video it's called What is Family Guy About? He talked about how that's a really good example of an episode to look to if you're looking for the overarching thesis of the show. Basically, in that episode, the main conflict is that Peter is battling with his nostalgia for the 80s, and now that nostalgia is impacting his daily life in some pretty chaotic and unfortunate ways. Again, I haven't seen this episode myself, so I don't have any like actual opinions about it, but when Tariq was explaining how living your whole life as if it were a TV show, I mean, it would ruin your life. That's when I was like, oh, every episode of this show is about this. Duh. And then the second episode of the first season made more sense to me as well after this, because Peter, he's not just addicted to TV, like he's completely TV brained. His life is so unhinged because the character that he's playing within the McFarlane verse has to represent a man who lets TV rule his life. All of that being said, I did not find the second episode of season 1 very funny. I counted 11 jokes that were cringe and 6 that were funny. There was a point while I was watching where I figured out why all of the mid-tier jokes, they weren't making me laugh. They were just making me angry. I think that was funny. I wanted to laugh, but the thing is that I didn't, because I felt like I was being tricked. It's like, see, that's my problem with a lot of these shows, is that there's like the cadence of a joke. Like it sounds like a setup, and then it sounds like there's a punchline, and it's like I almost laugh because I feel like I'm supposed to. Like, it's weird. I mean, I'm sure it's designed to be that way, but it makes me feel like I shouldn't laugh, actually. Like, you're not gonna tell a joke. If you want me to laugh, tell a joke. Don't just like give me the hint of a joke. And this episode also reminded me why I hate Meg's character so much. Like, obviously there's the problem with her not being able to like make decisions for herself, but also there's the fact that, like, I mean, she's the punching bag character. And I kind of mentioned it in my last video, but my childhood, it wasn't the greatest. And part of that experience was having various Meg jokes repeated at me by my family members, because, you know, I was the only female teenager in the house, and I had long since been designated the punching bag character of my family. The academic term for that is the golden child scapegoat dynamic, and I will give you a nickel if you can guess which side of the dynamic that I was on. I might be the only person in the world who's been abused verbally under the guise of a Family Guy quote, but I'm willing to bet that I'm not. And given that assumption, it sucks that a show that has been trying from the very beginning to say that, you know, copying these TV tropes in your life will have devastating consequences, it might have inadvertently, and in my case directly, did cause more of those consequences. You know, sucks. Obviously, it's not Family Guy's fault that my parents were abusive. That's not how this works. It does obviously put me in a position, though, where the show has to, like, earn back my trust. And so I don't think that the Meg jokes are very funny.
I have 13 tickets now. Is that enough?
Oh, sorry, Timmy, but you need 15 tickets to live.
So The third episode, this is the first one that isn't concerned so much with establishing characters or establishing themes. It's just sort of a fun little episode where we get to know everybody a little bit more, which is fun, and also the dynamics between them. The plot, it kicks off with Lois explaining that she's reserved the restaurant Cheesy Charlie's, which is this universe's Chuck E. Cheese, for Stewie's first birthday. And she wants to have the party there because for Meg and Chris's first birthdays, she didn't get to participate in the party because she was too busy making the party happen, which is obviously the case because Peter is useless, but she wants to be able to actually experience this party because it's the last first birthday that their family's gonna have. Peter doesn't exactly understand the gravity of the situation because he's an ass, but he does take the check to the restaurant to pay for the reservation, which is nice of him. While he's there, though, he can't resist the urge to fuck around, and he and Chris just start wasting time and playing a bunch of games. He ends up losing his watch in the claw machine because he sticks his arm up in it because he's impatient. And then he ends up fighting with a kid because the kid finds the watch and thinks it's like a claw machine prize. The manager of the place sees this go down and tries to kick Peter out because he's fighting with a child. And Peter uses his white man superpower of invoke reservation check, which all managers are weak to, and the manager immediately changes his tune and apologizes to Peter for misunderstanding. But Peter, he's still fired up over having his whiteness challenged in the first place, and so he revokes the reservation for Stewie's birthday party on the spot, and immediately he's replaced by a sea of other customers who also happen to know invoke reservation check. He's out of luck. He tells Lois about this, is obviously very devastated, and then to try to make up for this fact, Peter promises her that he'll put on a party at their house. She won't have to lift a finger. He'll cover all of it, again, despite the fact that he's never done it before in his life. Apparently, he thinks that he can do this now. Whatever. Fine. Let's give him some faith. Let's assume that Peter can do this. Put a pin in it. We'll talk about it in a second. I need to let you know what the B plot and the runner are because I forgot to mention them. This time, the B plot, it's Stewie. He's afraid of being unborn on his first birthday. He doesn't really understand what it means for his first birthday to be happening, and he assumes it means that the doctor that birthed him is going to return and put him back inside of the womb for some reason. Don't really get it, but that's what's happening with Stewie. And then the runner is that Meg is bad at making friends. She tried out for cheerleading and it didn't go well. She tells Peter about it. Peter gives her some pretty bad advice. He's always given her bad advice, but she takes it down to the letter. He tells her that all she needs to do to make friends is try harder to fit in, which is great because then the next day when she goes to school, she meets somebody who's in a cult. So great. Thanks, Dad. On the day that Stewie's party is supposed to happen, Peter tells Meg that she's allowed to go to her friend's house, which is actually a cult meeting. We'll talk about it in a second. And this upsets Lois because part of why this day is important to her is because her whole family is together, celebrating together, and her experiencing their whole family all at once. She actually wants to be a member of the family this time, and that means the whole family being there, including Meg. Peter somehow, he's clinching this. He's getting the party together. He's got some last minute decorations going. He's got some last minute cake. He's got himself the big ass piñata. He's ready to go. He runs off and manages to steal an entire circus parade and lead it back to the house to entertain the party guests, which is pretty cool. And then he's ready to do the most, and he runs off to go and find Meg because apparently it's sinking in for him now, the gravity of the situation, and his wife is very upset. So he runs and goes to find Meg. She's at the cult leader's house with the rest of the cult. It's a Heaven's Gate cult knockoff, by the way. They're all in tracksuits. When he gets there, he gives Meg this speech about how the day is really important to Lois. Meg starts to understand her mom's perspective a little bit better, and she starts to get that oh, this day is important, I should be there. The other Heaven's Gate kids, there you go, they are reminded of their own families and they want to come to Stewie's birthday party as well, but in the last minute, Peter calls for a toast. They're all holding cups of Kool-Aid, and when he does this, they reflexively drink to the toast, and then as they're on their way out of the house, they drop dead. Yes, I laughed at this. I am a bad person. The cult leader, he's bent. He has to go and find Meg because he wants to kill himself too, but he doesn't want to do it alone, and all these teens, they've beat him to it. So he runs after them to go and get Meg because he needs at least one cult follower to go down with. Before he leaves, though, he makes sure to remember his ceremonial white robe, which I promise that's relevant. I promise. Peter and Meg, they get back to the house just in time to serve the birthday cake. Unbeknownst to them, the cult leader also arrives like moments later, and he lets himself in the house. And Stewie is also in the house for some reason, even though it's his birthday party. And because the cult leader is wearing that white robe, Stewie mistakes him for the doctor that he was expecting to come unbirth him, and he shoots him with his ray gun. He got that guy. There's just either an eviscerated corpse in their house now, or he's like completely vaporized. I don't know. They didn't show it. And we're going to assume that he was just dematerialized because after this, we never hear anything about the cult leader again. Stewie, he blows out the candles, wishes for disco, and that's it. That's the episode. By my count, this episode was funnier than the last two. We've got 21 good jokes and 13 bad ones. Honestly, I was a little bit stoned when I watched it, though, so the data on this one is probably skewed. And yes, I did account for the Heaven's Gate stuff being fucked up. I put a tally in both categories. It's both shock humor and it made me laugh. I did like this episode. It was funny. I liked that we learned a little bit more about Lois. I wish that Meg had had some more personality traits going on other than wanting to be liked, but I feel like I'm gonna be saying that about Meg a lot, so...
Look, I got a date with my female wife.
Sorry if that cut was like weird. I had to run down and get a package, and my new headphones came. Look how fucking yellow these are. I'm so excited. Okay. Anyway, now we're gonna talk about the fourth episode. It did trigger my mean housewife brain a little bit, so when I originally watched it, my initial reaction, it wasn't very nice. And then when I watched it again, even though I was in a less angry mood, it like still didn't hit for me. It was boring. I don't know what to say. This is our required husband learns how to appreciate his wife episode. Don't get your hopes up, though. This is Family Guy. Everything that happens is going to be restored to the status quo before the credits roll, okay? I promise. The episode, it opens with establishing the Stewie runner right away, which is that he's teething right now, and he hates it so much that this inspires him to start inventing a time machine so that he can speed through the process and avoid the pain of teething, which I actually like this part. I like that Stewie is like shown to be working on his time machine as early as season 1. I think that's awesome. I don't know. I just think it's cool. And it's like well before we actually get an official time travel episode even. So he's been working on this thing for a long time. That's pretty cool. It's also established right away in this episode, though, that Lois, she's extremely tired of taking care of the house. She wants a break from taking care of everything and everyone. She's daydreaming about playing the piano to sold out concerts and, you know, finally being appreciated for something that she's good at. And with this episode following the last one, the one where the only thing that she wants for Stewie's birthday is to be able to participate in her family along with everybody else. It's pretty clear from this point on that Lois's main character trait is going to be that she is a withering mother and she's overworked. All of her expectations for everybody are so low. All she's asking for is to be paid some proper attention and respect. I felt really bad for Lois while watching this one. I am not gonna lie. I was kind of big mad at times. I hate Peter. He's a waste of space, a waste of air. Lois is a queen. You can't change the baby. You can't go and pick up the older kids from soccer practice or scouts or whatever. Soccer game. Sorry. And what can you do? What can you do? What a waste. I swear to God. If she kills him, she's right. All of the seasons after this of her being mean are completely justified. I would snap too. And then obviously, though, because this show isn't about Lois, it can't be about Lois, we quickly cut out to Peter on the lake with the guys. They're getting drunk and they're fishing. While he's out there, he makes sure to undermine the fact that Cleveland respects his wife, and he makes it a point to do chores around the house and spend time with her. And Peter thinks that this makes him a simp. This is because Peter is a scum-sucking bastard. This episode really doesn't do Peter any favors. When he gets back from the lake, he tracks mud all over the house that Lois just freshly cleaned, but he does some classic learned helplessness nonsense to get out of taking care of his own kids. And Lois, she clocks him on this, and she gets him to take Chris to his soccer game because now she needs to re-clean the house, so she doesn't have time to take him. The only other thing that she needs him to do is come back from the soccer game so that he can take care of Stewie while she teaches piano lessons. That's it. Go to the soccer game and come home. Not that hard. It's like one whole task, right? But he can't do it. He can't do it. He gets to the soccer game, and when he gets there, Quagmire's there trying to pick up soccer moms because he's a crusty, and he happens to have a cooler of beer with him, and because Peter is an alcoholic, this is all it takes for him to just not care about the fact that he should have been home to help his wife out. He's just watching the soccer game now, and while he's there, there's another parent who's sitting in the same row as him, and they are heckling the ref, and they're kind of shouting at Chris as well. They want the ref to pull Chris out of the game. The situation with this person, it escalates, and Peter ends up throwing a punch at this person, and then it gets turned into a transphobic joke that isn't funny, because it's revealed that this person that Peter punched was a pregnant woman who goes into labor after being punched. And so the whole thing is that this pregnant woman was so mannish in appearance that Peter thought that she was a man, and therefore he was allowed to punch her. It's a stupid joke that I hate. It doesn't need to be here. It doesn't need to be here, because in the next scene, we're shown that the consequence for punching this woman is that Peter is placed under house arrest, which is a consequence for some level of A and B, assault and battery. And last time I checked, that is not a gendered charge. That is the same exact charge Peter would have caught if he had punched a man. So they simply could have had him punch a man at the soccer game and be under house arrest, and the plot's the exact same. It's identical. I'm whisper yelling right now, but this has got me really heated. It's so stupid and transphobic. The only reason for this person to have been a woman is so that Peter could punch a butch woman, and they could just put jokes in there about it. It's not okay. Anyway, after Peter is placed under house arrest, he's still just lounging around the house and watching TV. He's complaining about how bored he is because he's like allergic to spending time with his kids or his wife in this one. I don't know. It's not cute. Lois still wants to spend time with him for some reason. I don't get it. And she convinces him to have this inside date with him, this dinner that she's gonna make. They can have a date in the house and it's gonna be fine. I don't get it. He's not worth the effort. I had it with Peter at this point. I have had it with Peter now, just reading what I've wrote about him. Throw the whole man out. He agrees to these plans for this special dinner, though, and Lois proceeds to overextend herself once more for this man while she's working on this beautiful ham dinner for them. Peter, he's just like sitting around drinking, and when he runs out of beer, he goes down to the basement for another one, and while he's down there, he sees a beer ghost, the apparition of the beer brand mascot, and the beer ghost convinces him to build a bar in the basement because that's a better use of his time than keeping a date with his wife. So he stands Lois up to build this bar. He builds the bar in the same amount of time that it takes Lois to finish the dinner and also sit around all night waiting for him. And she goes down to the basement eventually, and she confronts him about standing her up, and he just admits that he built the bar so that his friends could have a place to come hang out at their house, because he would rather be doing that than spending time with her. So, I just hate him, you know? I just hate him. For some reason, Peter's basement bar, it like pops off with the local guys. Like, his plan actually works. These guys actually want to be down in this basement with him, and he's not bored anymore. Problem solved. Unfortunately, this means that Lois is stuck upstairs doing all of the bar dishes, because obviously Peter isn't going to do them because he wants to be down there hanging out with the guys. He doesn't want to run a bar. Why does he think that Lois likes to do housework? Does he think that she has a choice? She says it's because she loves her family, but it's literally because if she doesn't do it, nobody else will. This is it. This is the forced choice. This is why at the beginning of the episode, when Lois gives him this speech about how she does all the things she does out of the love of her heart, no, not true. She doesn't have a choice. She does not have the option of not doing it, because if she doesn't, nobody else will. That's not a choice. At this point, she just wants her husband to stop taking advantage of her kindness and her patience. She does sort of snap while she's doing the dishes, and she goes upstairs to take a bath. She snaps again while she's in the bath, because while she's trying to relax and she's fantasizing about Peter actually appreciating her, one of the randos from the bar just like lets himself in to have a piss while she's in the tub, and he just like fully sees her naked, and obviously this is very upsetting to her, so she storms down to the basement to confront Peter again. And while she's down there, she sees that he has moved her piano that she teaches piano lessons with down into the basement. And when she confronts him about that too, okay, and the fact that Stewie is drunk, by the way. Oh, come on, Peter. Whiskey on Stewie's gums because he has a toothache. Cutaway to Peter experiencing child abuse. That sucks. It explains everything. He tells her this lie that he brought the piano down so that she could play it for the guys there. But then he, like, under his breath, like, reveals to the audience that he was gonna turn into a clam bar. Rancid beast. Obviously, Lois doesn't hear him say that part, though, so she's just like, cool, I would love to play the piano for these people. And so she goes and she does this. And while she's, like, going up there, Peter tries to, like, undermine her by, like, telling the guys just to, like, you know, clap and cheer and make a fuss, even if they don't like what she's doing up there. I don't know what his problem is. Fortunately, the narrative is on Lois's side with this. The guys, like, genuinely enjoy the performance that she's putting on. And she gets so hyped up that she starts singing, and she gets up from the piano bench, and she, like, even throws a little burlesque action in there, because, like, I don't know, she's just, like, talented like that, and the guys are loving it. And they love it so much that they ask her to come back the next night, and sing again. And she agrees, because of course she does. This is what she's been waiting for this whole time. Also, like, I don't know, it's fun. She's having fun. Meanwhile, though, Peter, and I cannot stress this enough, hates that his wife is getting any attention at all. Don't pull a bad bitch if you can't handle it. I hate this clown. At this point, it's kind of established that Lois's main personality trait is that she's unhappy with the way that her family treats her. And now it's being established that Peter's main personality trait is that he's insecure. And he's self-centered. Those are his main personality traits. After Brian encourages him to be more jealous, because Brian is also a jealous bitch, Peter's house arrest is lifted, and he takes the opportunity to take his hating to the next level, if you will. And when he runs into the wives of the basement bar patrons, he tells them that their husbands only come down to his bar because Lois is putting on these, like, sexy shows. Because these women have internalized misogyny, they believe him, and they go down to the bar to confront Lois. And they do this, like, during her performance. And Lois has to explain to them why she likes doing the show so much, and they do understand that she's singing because it's the only break that she gets from her day-to-day life. That makes sense to them. And after they get the picture, they turn on their husbands, which is who they should have been upset with in the first place if they were upset at all. But they turn on their husbands now to confront them, and this turns Quagmire off. Quagmire, who's at the bar. And he's smoking inside because he's a crusty, and he flicks his lit cigarette into a trash can as he's leaving. This causes a trash fire in the basement, and it spreads like quick throughout the house, right? Everybody that's in the basement, they're able to get out except for Peter and Lois, right? They're trapped by a burning beam. It like lands on the stairs and they're not able to get out. And while they're down there, they apologize to each other for not communicating well, even though I don't think Lois needs to apologize for anything, whatever. They apologize for not communicating well, and Peter like promises to start doing chores around the house and spending more time with the kids, that kind of thing. It's like kind of sweet and nice, but it does leave kind of a bad taste in my mouth that Peter needs to be faced with his own mortality to be nice to his wife. Like, you shouldn't need to be literally on death's door to know that you need to tell your wife that you love her. It makes me wonder what these two even have in common other than their 3 kids. You know what I mean? Like, what's going on here? Whatever. Upstairs, Stewie, he's working on his time machine, and he like puts the last little piece together at just the right moment, and it rewinds time about a week. It rewinds time up to the point where Lois is trying to convince Peter to take Chris to the soccer game so nobody dies in the house fire. So there is that, but that also means that that whole conversation that Peter and Lois had down there where Peter said he's going to do better, that gets turned back as well. Told you the status quo would be restored. Peter even trips on the time machine prototype on his way out of the room, so that gets reset as well. He can't take Chris to the soccer game too because his leg is hurt. So like literally nothing in this episode happens. It's great. I love it. I think that it goes without saying that I hated this episode. I didn't like it at all. I counted 4 whole jokes that made me laugh, and 14 that made me cringe. I honestly thought that when I watched it the second time, it would make me laugh some more than it did the first time, but it didn't. Pretty disappointing. I don't really want to talk about this one again.
Hey, so much fun it should be illegal. Like copyright infringement. Ho-ho! See you at the game, Joel! Ho-ho!
Alright, so the next episode, the 5th episode of season 1, it is hand over fist more entertaining than the previous episode, but that doesn't mean that it's like good. This is the episode where we meet Joe Swanson, and it is extremely mid. The plot kicks off with Peter's work getting their softball team together. They are the happy-go-lucky toy boys, and Mr. Weed, Peter's boss, he is introducing a hottie to them that is allegedly so good at baseball that he is going to win their team the annual softball game. They take him out to practice with them, and Peter is pitching, and he apparently is so good at pitching that while he hits the hottie with a pitch, so he's bad at pitching in that respect, he throws the ball so hard that this injures the hottie so much he can't play. So now they're one guy short, and they also don't have their like clinch the win guy. And this isn't a problem though, don't worry. Peter has a new neighbor. He snubbed the new neighbor, but apparently, according to Lois, Joe used to play baseball in college. So now Peter wants to go and talk to him. He hurries over to Joe's house in the middle of the night, and he hounds Joe into joining the team. Obviously, Joe is a wheelchair user, and at this point, most of the audience is going to know this because this show is 24 years old, but somehow Peter, while he's there that night, he doesn't notice that Joe uses a wheelchair at all. And this is likely because Peter is the most self-absorbed person in Quahog, Rhode Island. Joe agrees to play the game though because he thinks it'll be fun, and the next day he shows up obviously in his wheelchair, and there are some ableist comments that reveal the fact that Peter did not notice the chair before, and therefore the rest of the team doesn't know either, and they're all ableist about it. We can blame it on the era, but it doesn't matter. That's stupid. Joe is obviously is perfectly capable of playing softball in his chair. He would not have agreed to play if he were not confident in his ability to do so. I am going to stand by that fact. I don't care if that's what they were actually thinking when they wrote it. I just think that it would make sense that somebody would not agree to do something if they didn't think they could. But he said he would. So, like, well, of course he can.
That you could.
Not only can he play, though, he's, like, really good. He whips out his college baseball skills, and he does get the win for them. So the happy-go-lucky Toy Boys, they win the annual softball game. Everybody, including Peter, is really stoked about this, actually, at first. They all go back to the Swansons' house for a barbecue to celebrate, and everything is great until Joe takes the opportunity to tell the story of how he lost the use of his legs. And this is because Stewie is curious about his wheelchair, and also because Joe is a cop, and no cop is going to miss the opportunity to tell their tragic line of duty story. I literally wrote in my notes, IDC about Joe's spine, LOL. And that is because I don't. I simply do not care about his spine. I don't. He's a cop, so fuck him. And if you're bothered by that, he is a cartoon. So, anyway, he broke his spine by being thrown off of a roof by the Gunch.
My green hats, I shall see you in hell.
Not gonna lie, this thing made me laugh the hardest the whole episode. The way that they drew this great value Grinch is so fucked up. I'm obsessed. And this is a scene where a cop eats shit, so this is a good scene to me. After Joe tells everybody this story, Peter gets all mopey because he's not the center of attention, and he's not impressive to anybody compared to someone like Joe, who actually had a mortally perilous experience and survived. And so this causes Peter to spiral into insecurity, as he often does, and he starts listening to the local police scanner for crimes, because he thinks that if he stops a crime, he can prove to everybody that he is actually just as impressive and capable as Joe is. And so he's sitting at the kitchen table and he's listening, and eventually something comes across the scanner about a bank robbery downtown. And so he hurries downtown and he brings Brian and the whole family with him. Brian is there because he knows that what Peter is doing is foolish, and he thinks that it will be funny to watch. And the family doesn't know why they're being brought downtown, but Peter is bringing them simply because he wants to prove to them specifically that he's capable. So he wants them to witness him try to stop this bank robbery by himself. By the time they get there, actually, the robbery is already de-escalating. So they literally don't need to be there. The teller had already handed over a sum of cash to the thieves, and they were on their way out of the building. Literally, things were already coming down. But when Peter gets there, the robbers see him through the glass door, and they assume that he is a cop, because of course they do. And this causes the situation to escalate again. And this frightens Peter, and he's like cowering under a desk. Brian is with him, and while they're under the desk, he Amelia Bedelia's something that Brian tells him about improvising to get out of this situation, and Peter literally engages the thieves in an improv scene, which, to his credit, does distract them enough for him to take control of the situation. He's able to get his hands, plural, on one of their guns, and he's able to basically be a cop in the situation. De-escalate the situation cop style. This moment, though, while he's armed, is of course the moment where the actual cops arrive, and Joe with them, because Joe sees the crime on the news and he needs to insert himself as well. And also, this is so funny because in the moment where Peter has the gun, the family, they're not even watching. They left the car forever ago so that they could go shopping, because that was more interesting and pressing to them than waiting for Peter to do whatever he was doing inside the bank. And by the time they come back, it's like a full-fledged hostage scenario, basically, because the cops see Peter through the door and they assume that Peter, who is armed, is the one who's holding the people inside hostage, not the thieves who had originally arrived. When Joe comes, he gets the whole thing sorted out. And obviously it's his introductory episode, so it makes sense for Joe to be the one who winds down the situation and gets things back to where they're supposed to be. Everybody carries Joe away on their backs, super stoked for him saving the day once again, except for Peter, who's left there feeling put out because not only did he not save the day, but his family didn't even see him do anything. So it's like it didn't count. They comfort him. They tell him that he's the hero of their family no matter what, even though he's nothing like Joe. And Peter is cemented back into his comfortable mediocrity for another week. I did like this episode better than some of the others. I liked it better than, say, Mind Over Murder, but it was still kind of only like moderately entertaining. I counted 13 jokes that made me laugh and 14 jokes that didn't. So overall, it was a pretty balanced episode, and honestly kind of the strongest episode of the first season for me.
Is it a good movie?
Well, it has its moments.
Can we read these? Boom. Boom. Cute, right? Okay. So this next episode that I want to talk about, it's a little bit dicey, I think is the word that we're going to use. There are some funny lines. The satire is okay if you blur your vision, but the plot relies pretty heavily on racism. So there is that. I will say right off the bat that most of the episode's runtime takes place at a Native American-owned casino somewhere in the rural northeast between Rhode Island and New York. I think you can see where the racism comes in. So if you are not up to hearing me talk about anti-Native racism, totally understandable. You can skip to this timestamp that I'm going to put in. I'll also put a link down below in the description so that you can skip to the next episode discussion, because it doesn't really matter. You don't need to hear this if you don't want to hear it. Okay, so episode 6, The Sun Also Draws. It's actually based off of a movie, Lost in America. I haven't seen it. The Wikipedia page says some stuff. Let me paraphrase it for you. A rich couple, sick of their too comfortable lives, they liquidate their assets. They take an RV on a cross-country trip from the East Coast to the West Coast. They don't get very far before they lose all their money at a casino and unsuccessfully attempt to get it back. And then the rest of the movie happens. And now that I'm reading my notes here about I don't even think I got the coasts right. It doesn't matter. I'm really only concerned about the part that is being parodied by this Family Guy episode, you know what I mean? In the Family Guy episode that I have seen, the story starts out with Chris at a scout meeting. He's away from the group. He's drawing in a sketch pad. He's clearly not very interested in being in the scouts at all. The scout leader, he announces that there's going to be a soapbox derby. Again, Chris does not care. He only wants to draw. He doesn't care about a soapbox derby. He doesn't want to build a race car, none of that. He doesn't want to participate. But later that night at home, he accidentally lets it slip that this derby is going to happen. Peter immediately gets so excited and he wants to build the race car immediately, and he doesn't want to hear Chris out about quitting the scouts at all. He doesn't let Chris finish the sentences. So they build the race car and Chris has to do the derby. At the derby, Chris, he's not paying attention to what the scout leader is explaining at the beginning about the different racing flags, and so he accidentally takes a false start and then loses control of his race car. He ends up sort of chasing the scout leader down the hill, and this is very upsetting to the scout leader. He had already kind of had it with Chris not participating and having a lack of enthusiasm, and so this is the final straw. He wants to kick Chris out, but he agrees that Chris can stay in the scouts if he earns a merit badge within the next 3 days.
3 days? That's tomorrow.
This threat doesn't really mean anything to Chris, obviously, because he wanted to quit anyway, so he's not concerned with getting a merit badge, but Peter is like really caught up in this. He really wants to get Chris that merit badge or whatever. He wants to make sure that Chris remains in the scouts. He decides the best way to do this is to take the whole family to Youth Scout headquarters in New York. So they all pile in the car and they're on their way, except for Brian, who he stays behind to get a break from everybody.
I'll fix your sink, Miss Romano. And by fix your sink, I mean I'll have sex with you. And by have sex with you, I mean I'll fix your sink. And by sink, I mean your reproductive organ. And by reproductive organ, I mean the thing between your knees. And by the thing between your knees, Well, I guess that one's kind of self-explanatory.
Brian thinks one day at a time is funny now because he can't change the channel and turn the TV off. He's just been trapped with it. That's what's gonna happen to me! That's literally what's gonna happen to me. Oh no. While they're in the car, they're not quite to New York yet. Peter is suddenly struck with the urge to poop, and we are presented with a series of unfunny shit jokes before Peter pulls off of the road at a casino. He runs into the building to use the bathroom and leaves the rest of the family to sort of wander around the lobby of the casino. And obviously, the depictions of all of the native people in this episode are questionable, to say the least, especially because I'm willing to bet that there were not any natives in the writer's room. If there were, I will eat my words. Show them to me. And it is sort of more complicated than just like cartoonish depiction of Native Americans racist. I mean, because like theoretically, okay, the natives in this episode are the ones who either own or work at this casino. So in theory, they're the ones who named it Geronimo's Palace. They're the ones who decorated it in this sort of kitschy, racist style that white people who frequent casinos are going to expect. And that's because obviously they're trying to make money off of their customer base. The problem is that we are not talking about real people. We are talking about fictional people that were made up by real white people. And so we don't really have a way of knowing if all of this everything was written with any sort of like knowledge, or if it was just edgy middle school humor, you know? With all that being said, the entire setting of the casino decked out with stereotypical symbols of Native American culture, entirely staffed by native people who don't even have actual names, just those fakey white kid at summer camp ones with like puns on their jobs. It feels weird. Like the show cannot decide what it's trying to say about Native Americans, just that it definitely finds them funny. Don't like it. The whole thing, it just keeps getting worse, by the way. Like, it just keeps snowballing. The family members, they start talking to the employees of the casino. And while Peter's in the bathroom, Lois, she talks to a guy with a name tag that says, "Sees you coming." And he persuades her to play a little bit of virtual poker while she waits. So the very first native person with a speaking part that we meet in the episode is explicitly depicted as predatory, which is great. Really, really good sign for the rest of the episode, I'm sure. By the time Peter's out of the bathroom, Lois is completely addicted to the virtual poker game. She has bet and lost all of their money and their car, because apparently this casino and the one that was in Lost in America can accept physical items as bets. That doesn't happen in real life. Just like the movie, Peter, he tries to lie about being part of the same tribe that owns the casino because he wants to try to claim entitlement to the casino's winnings so that he can get their car back. The specific tribe that owns this casino, it isn't actually named in the episode, and because we don't know exactly where they're at, it's kind of hard for me to guess. But I can tell you this much: they sure as hell ain't Great Plains natives. No, ma'am. But what motifs does Peter invoke when he tries to convince the owners of this casino that he's part of their tribe? Why, Great Plains native ones. Of course. And, you know, that's not his fault. He's the victim of the narrative. He's supposed to be racist. The whole family is racist. That's the way that they all are. They're all caricatures. We're supposed to dislike him. He's supposed to be a buffoon. The problem with this, though, is that, like, the joke is not that Peter is, he's not the representative of the writers. The writers aren't racist like Peter is. Peter is representative of this other third party that the writers are making fun of. Some white guys, not us, they're racist, and it's funny because look how stupid they are, right? That's supposed to be the joke. That's fine. The problem with the scene is that there's a cutaway, and the cutaway, they made sure to include in this cutaway a little red-skinned, Peter-esque fictional griffin ancestor doing like a parodied rain dance thing. And he's surrounded by a tribe of like decidedly Plains native coded people and some teepees. And the whole bit, it like takes this moment that could have been a valid piece of satire about white people and their like insane need to claim a pinch of Native American heritage out of pure greed, and it turns it into minstrelsy. I hate it so much. It exhausts me. It makes me tired. Without the cutaway, it's fine. Let the joke breathe. And the episode continues to spiral as the native guys that own the casino, who are drawn all super racist, by the way that they're drawn is bad. They send him on a vision quest to prove whether or not he's part of their tribe. And there are a lot of things wrong with this, but the important part here is that those casino owners, they know that Peter's lying, okay? And they're trying to call him on his bluff. Peter and Chris end up going out into the woods, and this is because the casino owners don't really give a shit which white guys they're sending out there. They're just, again, trying to call him on his lie, and Chris wants to take a moment to talk to his dad about the scouts, so he follows Peter out into the woods to have a moment alone with him. While they're out in the woods, the whole rest of the family, they're in their hotel room. They're worried about him because they don't have any wilderness skills. Meg is given another personality trait in this one, which is cool. While she's in the hotel room, she is shown comforting Lois, who's really worried about Peter and Chris. And it is cool to see her have something going on other than insecurity. It is sort of a double-edged sword, though, because it's like she gets another personality trait, but that personality trait is that she's being relegated to being the family therapist, which is really typical for, like, you know, your eldest daughter in a sitcom. And, like, obviously the idea here would be that since Meg's playing a satirized version of the eldest daughter on a sitcom, that this would be, you know, the whole point of her being this way. But it is pretty well documented that the reason Meg is the way she is in the first season, at least, is the lack of women in the writer's room. So, like, I'm really not trying to give anybody credit for any satire here if they don't deserve it, you know. Meg is the way that she is, not by intention, but because the people writing her couldn't think of another way for a girl to act. Gee, I wonder who else in this episode is suffering from this problem. Lois eventually confronts the owners of the casino about endangering her husband and son by sending them out into the wilderness, and they sort of admit that they only sent him out there to prove that he was lying, and they don't really know anything about vision quests anyway, which is, like, I guess okay, because, like, vision quests don't have anything to do with any of the, like, cultures that are in this area, so, like, I guess it makes sense that they don't know anything about them. They just know that white people know what they are. I guess, whatever. It sucks in the episode because this conversation really only serves to prove that the native guys are villains. Like, that's it. It just villainizes them further. We don't like that. Out in the woods, Peter, he's hallucinating. He hallucinates some talking trees and then a talking constellation in the shape of Arthur Fonzarelli, because Peter's so TV brained that his spiritual guide is the Fonz. My spiritual guide is Fraser Crane. And then after convening with his version of nature, Peter, he's briefly gifted with the patience to talk with his son for longer than a few seconds, and so in that time, Chris is able to explain to his father that he was never concerned with getting back into the Scouts anyway. He was only worried about having time to practice drawing, and Peter, he seems to finally accept this. They hug. The talking trees that Peter hallucinated, they sing that song Cats in the Cradle. It's sweet until it gets interrupted by something stupid. One of the talking trees pulls out a lighter and accidentally starts a forest fire. Not really sure which part of that's supposed to be funny. It's annoying. Peter and Chris, they outrun the fire, the wildfire. It's a forest fire with cartoon logic. And then that same cartoon logic, the casino was completely untouched. They return to the hotel. Everything's safe and sound. The owners aren't super stoked that they came back to the casino because now they have to return the car that they didn't even want. But at this point, they're kind of more upset that the white guy had a spiritual vision and none of them have had any spiritual visions. There was a bit at the end that was a little bit funny. This bit, it reminded me of American Dad, so I will admit that I laughed. The family, they stopped to do this brief, like, the more you know parody where they each pause to take a moment and, like, dispel some racial stereotypes. Peter gets a turn at the end, and when it is his turn, he kind of undercuts everybody's previous statements because all he says is Canada sucks. And obviously that's the part that made me laugh. And it's also the part of the episode that I found the most interesting when I was reading the Wikipedia page, because apparently this joke about Canada was way more controversial than any of the fucked up stuff that they do with Native people in this one. So, like, that's really telling. 1999 was a time. But, okay, so here, what's even more telling, though, when I was reading this Wikipedia page, this is what I learned, was that, this episode was written by one Canadian guy and directed by another Canadian guy. So, naturally, that dig at Canada, right? It's a good-natured, funny, haha joke. We're from Canada. It's not coming from a place of malice, okay? And I just wonder if the same can be said about any of those jokes that were made about Native American people. And I don't really think so, you know? Like, I don't have the time or the energy to explain the history of how Native people have been treated in Canada and the US, so we can just leave it, like, not good. Did the average screenwriter in 1999 have anything to do with the atrocities committed against First Nations people in Canada? Probably not. Does the same screenwriter probably have some internalized biases about how Native people should be portrayed in media, in his own art? Probably yes. And, you know, that was kind of the final piece of the puzzle for me. That was all I needed to know to make it, like, absolutely certain that I never watch this episode again. Even with 17 decent jokes compared to 13 bad ones, the entire episode is just one long racist joke, so, like, it doesn't really matter. I'm not looking forward to seeing the show talk about Indigenous people again. Alright, so the last episode isn't really a season finale because this isn't a serialized show, but it is the last episode of the first season. It's a strong-ish episode to the end of the season if you use strong generously. The cold open is a really shocking child abuse joke that the family sees on TV that's followed by Stewie beating his teddy bear. It's another little bit of them, like, directly saying that imitating things that you see on television is unhealthy, but also it's, like, sort of just making two jokes that could be, like, interpreted as not being related at all, because the first part happens in the cold open and the second part happens after the opening theme, so I don't know, half credit for that one, I guess. It doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the episode. It just kind of opens up a scene that gives us a little, like, peek into Brian interacting with both Stewie and Lois to show us the dynamic between the three of them and how that works. Stewie and Brian, they still don't get along at this point, and Brian and Lois, they do. They sort of have this, like, respect for each other that the other members of the family don't really treat Brian with at this point in time. Next, we are shown that they are going through a record high heat wave, but the Griffin family, they don't have an air conditioner, so they're cooking. And they also, apparently, they don't have the money to just, like, go out and buy one either. So Peter suggests that he and Brian enter a dog show to try to win a $500 cash prize so that they could buy an air conditioner. Brian is a little bit hesitant, but he eventually agrees because, like, he wants to help the family get the AC, right? There's, like, immediately trouble, though, because while they're practicing for the competition, it's, like, really clear that Peter is not open to listening to Brian about how he feels about this whole thing. He's just interested in, like, Brian being his dog, and so it doesn't really matter that Brian has, like, human emotions and human intelligence. He agreed to do something. He is Peter's dog. He's gonna do it. That's all that matters to Peter. And so Brian sort of, like, powers through Peter being a prick, and then when it comes time for the dog show, Brian does pretty alright. He runs through the agility course. He stops to show off his opposable thumbs and, like, lights himself and smokes a cigarette, which is, like, not an actual trick, but, like, I'm gonna count it because if you were at a dog show and you saw a dog, like, stop, stand up on his hind legs, light himself a cigarette, and smoke it, you'd shit your pants. It would blow your mind. So, like, I'm gonna count that as a trick. Then he stops, though, after that at the end for the obedience portion, right? And when we saw them practicing the obedience portion previously, this was where we saw the tension between them. Brian, he'll follow the commands, he'll technically do what he's supposed to do, but he doesn't really like it, and he also kind of, like, needs Peter to come from a place of respect in order to feel comfortable doing these things anyway. The problem comes when Peter immediately, like, jumps to balancing a dog bone on Brian's nose. And this is apparently, like, super demeaning to Brian. He snaps and he storms out.
He's a diva.
And after he leaves, the family follows him, but they continue to fight in the car. And now it's even worse because they don't have the money for the air conditioner. And now the fact that they don't have the money is Brian's fault, specifically. It's really easy to transfer blame when the scapegoat never got a say in the first place.
And this whole thing could have been avoided if Peter had just initiated a conversation.
But because they didn't have a conversation, Brian is now at this point of snapping again, so he demands to be let out of the car, and he walks the rest of the way home. Obviously, the family gets home before he does because they're in the car and he isn't, and so Brian is out walking after dark, alone. And this is where the episode loses me. Brian gets picked up by a cop for not having a tag on his collar, and there's some pretty obvious racial coding going on. Both the cop and Brian use some language that implies dogs being equivalent to a race of oppressed people, specifically black people. Not good, and it only gets worse, okay? The cop brings Brian home and tells Peter that he has to pay a fine for Brian being off leash and without a tag. And this makes the conflict between the two of them even worse. And of course, Peter's not interested in apologizing to Brian for being disrespectful, and Brian doesn't feel like he needs to apologize for the ticket because obviously he wouldn't have been out walking alone after dark if Peter hadn't upset him in the first place. Peter's refusal to apologize leads to the situation escalating again, and he reminds Brian that when they met, Brian was a stray dog on the street. And this is a fucked up power play, I will be clear. And this causes Brian to, like, snap again and storm out of the house. And Peter lets him do this. But while Brian is out, he experiences a series of social injustices that are pretty much all direct references to how black people were treated in the United States prior to the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s. It's not good. Back at the Griffin house, Lois finally convinces Peter that he misses Brian and that he should go out and look for him. At some point, they put up some lost dog posters featuring a photo of Brian posing on the piano bench in their living room. And Brian, who is now begging for change on the street like he was when he first met Peter, approaches a man who snubs him and tells him that he should make something of himself like the dog on the missing poster.
And when Brian tells him that is him in the picture, the guy doesn't believe him, and this leads to Brian snapping yet again, and he bites the guy on the leg, basically becoming the animal that people keep insisting that he is, because he is. He's a dog. For some reason, he's arrested by the police despite being a dog. I know we saw him be arrested in the pilot, but he was never, like, put on trial like Peter was. Presumably, he was only being held in that cell until Lois came and got him. But this time, the cops bring Brian to the police station, and he's put in a jail cell that's, like, clearly meant for people, but for some reason, there's another dog in there. And that's, like, not super important, but I feel like it's a good example of the writers twisting themselves into knots trying to make this episode work. Brian is sentenced to lethal injection despite the Griffins coming to the police station to collect him, and this allegedly being the first time that he's bitten anyone, so it doesn't matter that he has a family and that he doesn't have a history with aggression, they're still going to put him down. He does have the chance to appeal the sentence though, and so we get a montage of him studying law in order to represent himself in court. It's fine. It's boring. The most notable part of this is that there is a jail guard who happens to be a black woman, and for some reason they turned her into a mammy stereotype. It's not good. It's really boring and annoying. Whatever. We get to the day of the trial, and Brian is ready to go. He wants to plead his case. He gets in front of the city council and proceeds to reference the Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson, which, for my non-Americans or Americans who weren't taught history well, Plessy v. Ferguson is an example of one of the more racist decisions that the Supreme Court has made. Basically, Homer Plessy, a man of mixed race, he boards a whites-only train car in 1892 New Orleans. By doing so, he's violating Louisiana's 1890 Separate Car Act, which required there be separate but equal train car accommodations for both white people and black people. And he is therefore arrested because he's in a whites-only car. Plessy's lawyers, they appealed his case all the way up to the Supreme Court on the grounds that the Separate Car Act was unconstitutional in the first place due to the 14th Amendment, which established legal equality between white people and black people. The Supreme Court, though, they disagreed. They basically said that, no, that judge who originally sentenced Plessy is right, Louisiana is right, the 14th Amendment, it does establish legal equality between races. However, it does not require that people cease all racial-based discrimination. Basically, this is the Supreme Court case that legalized systematic racism. It's never been officially overturned. There have been several landmark cases since then that have been effectively undoing it, but nevertheless, it is still an infamous case of racism and ineffectiveness on the part of the United States Supreme Court. And that's why it's so interesting that this is the first case that Brian cites when he gets his chance to talk in front of the city council. My only guess is that they went with this one because of maximum recognition value, but I don't know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're trying to argue for better social treatment. And if it wasn't recognition that they were going for, the other reason I can think of for them picking this specific case would be to further cement the metaphor that dogs in this universe are similar to black people in any way, shape, or form, or rather, their social place is similar to how black people were treated prior to the civil rights movement of the 60s. It's clumsy. I don't like it. City council, they don't want to listen to Brian regardless of what he has to say. They cut him off. He could have had some other cases that he was going to whip out that would have made more sense, but we will never know. What we do see is Peter bribing city council at the last minute so that Brian is not euthanized. Then we get a triumphant shot of Brian walking out of the courthouse and parting the crowd in front of him as he goes to drink out of a human drinking fountain. I think it's supposed to be triumphant, thrilling, satisfying, but it was just another weird racial allegory to me. It didn't really hit. Race allegories where animals are equated to groups of people, they hardly really hold up to me when you examine them further than the surface level, and honestly, like I said before, they're tasteless. It's just like all the other questionable things. It's do I give this episode a pass for being from 1999? I don't want to. That's stupid. It's stupid. The whole thing, it's clumsy, and it's half-baked. I don't like it. The atrocities committed against minority groups are not fodder for jokes, especially jokes about dogs. Anyway, there's 8 good jokes in this one, and 11 bad ones. It's pretty bad for the last episode of the season.
Oh, he's gay.
So, before I move on to the second season, I wanted to take a little break. We just talked about all 7 episodes of the first season of Family Guy, and I wanted to digest it a bit before we move on. I don't want to overwhelm y'all with information just yet, and I also want to wrap my thoughts up on season 1, so this is kind of for me, but I hope it's for you too. So I went into the project with the intention of figuring out why I watched so much of the show when I was younger. I was kind of hoping that I would find an episode somewhere along the way through season 1 that made me laugh so many times that it would just make sense. It would be clear to me. But no, that episode that I'm looking for, it's not in season 1. I don't know what season it will be in, but it's not in this first season. If we count up all of the good jokes that I counted and then all of the bad jokes that I counted, we get 78 jokes that made me laugh compared to 89 that did not. Again, I didn't count the mid jokes just for simplicity's sake. It's just really interesting to me that a season that was so unfunny was still so beloved that I got 2 more seasons after this. Odd. My main takeaways, my 2 main takeaways are 1, the writers love a mammy caricature, and 2, the satire lazy as hell. Don't like it. Let me elaborate. Let me explain. There are plenty of instances in this season where one could argue that a seemingly tasteless joke is actually like a really dry piece of satire. And I don't want to take that interpretation away from people, because I would be lying if I said that I didn't see it too. I certainly do at times. It's just that there are far more times that I find myself doing like mental gymnastics to make the satire make sense and to make the message clear. I don't know, guys. Maybe Family Guy is just too advanced of a show for me. Or maybe the jokes that the writers present just aren't all that good. Like, maybe they're just not constructed all that well. In order for me to believe that each racist joke Peter makes is because that's what would happen if TV dads were real, I also have to give the writers the benefit of the doubt and trust that that was their intention every time. And unfortunately, we have no clarity of purpose here. We have no way of understanding if that's what they mean to do every single time. All we have is the resulting racist jokes that all just look like racist jokes. And so unless you're 100% in on the joke about Peter being a caricature, your interpretation of the humor is going to be entirely different. And that's not to mention the writers undercutting themselves with cutaways at times when the satire, like, could have been pretty strong. It's frustrating. And truthfully, all of this is making me really worried that I'm not going to like American Dad anymore by the time I get to it. So before I like let myself wallow too much in my feelings, let's move on to season 2. I tricked you. We're not going to talk about season 2 just yet. And we're not going to talk about season 2 just yet because I haven't finished watching it, I haven't finished writing it, I haven't recorded it, I haven't done anything in regards to season 2 because for some reason I thought this was all going to be one video. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I don't know why I thought that. My own hubris. Turns out I'm going to need to chunk each season into its own video, which means I'm actually going to wrap it up here, and we will talk about season 2 at a later date once I've finished actually properly assessing it and writing you people a lovely script. So that's just how that's going to be. For now, though, I guess I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that I do see you next time and you join me for the next foray into the McFarlane verse that I tape. And if you feel so inclined, please check out my Sims channel. I would really appreciate it. Subscribe to me here, subscribe to me there, follow me on Instagram if you so choose, leave me a comment, give me a like if you liked it, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!